For the square root functions, remember rule number 2 that we wrote down together. I'm going to go ahead and copy this rule. The radicand has to be greater than or equal to 0. So I copy this rule. I'm going to go ahead and come down here and paste that rule here, okay? The radicand, whatever is underneath the square root, better be greater than or equal to 0 because it can't be negative, right? So let's set that up. So find the domain of the function. H of x is a square root function. So whenever you're finding the domain of a radical or square root function, I should say square root function, you grab what's inside, you take it out, you write down that 42 plus 7x has to be greater than or equal to 0. Okay, that's the restriction, right? So it will be wrong. Okay, let me go ahead and write down the common wrong, like mistakes. It will be wrong to say 42 plus 7x is greater than 0. That's wrong. Or a lot of people do this too. 42 plus 7x can't be equal to 0. So these are the common mistakes that people make when they are doing domain of a rational function or square root function. The only right one is to say that it is greater than or equal to 0. Let's go ahead and solve this. I'll go ahead and subtract 42 from both sides. Minus 42 on both sides. If I do that, I get positive 7x is greater than or equal to negative 42. Let's divide both sides by 7. Okay, if I divide the left side by 7, I get x. Oh, whoopsie, let me go down so that you can see what I'm writing. X is greater than or equal to negative 42 divided by 7 is negative 6. So circle this. This is the answer. But now what we're going to do is we're going to try to graph this so that we can write this in interval notation. Okay, so I like to graph. I'm going to put the negative 6 in the middle, and I'll go ahead and draw a circle. What type of circle should this be? Should this be an open circle or a closed circle? Use closed circle because it's greater than or equal to, because of that part in the bottom, okay? Because it says greater than or equal to, you need to close that circle this time. Now look, because it says it's greater than, because x is greater than or equal to, so you go to the right side from it, okay? Right side from negative 6. So don't go everywhere. You're not doing to the right and to the left. Don't do that. It says x is greater than negative 6. So you are only allowed to go to the right side of this graph, okay? Right side of the negative 6, okay? So let's write the interval notation, okay? So we start from negative 6, but we have a square bracket because we have a closed circle. It can have negative 6. It keeps on going to the right to positive infinity. And unlike rational function, a square root function domain, it didn't come out to be a union of interval, but this is the domain. That's the domain. Okay, let's look at another practice problem. Okay, the rule is simple. You just grab that radicand, what is underneath the square root, only the part that is underneath the square root, and set it greater than or equal to 0. But sometimes there are tricky problems. Like, take a look at this for me. If I were to highlight the radicand here, what is the radicand? What is the only thing that is underneath the square root? It's actually negative x, right? But you know, like so many people make a mistake. It is wrong to say negative x plus 8 is greater than or equal to 0. Because plus 8 is not under square root, okay? So you should be careful. This is not part of the radicand. So you can only grab, oh, that's a bad handwriting right there. You should only grab what is underneath the square root, which is negative x, and you set it greater than or equal to 0. So what was this plus 8 doing? It wasn't really important at all. That part we could have just ignored. It could have been plus 56 and it didn't make any difference. Now let's go ahead and divide both sides by, well, what's the number in front of x? There's an invisible negative 1 there, right? So you go ahead and divide both sides by -1. Okay? If you do that, I wish you remember this rule. When you multiply or divide by a negative number, okay, I'll say remember to flip the inequality. You learned that in Algebra 1 sometime, right? So I'm going to have to flip this inequality, which used to say greater than or equal to, but we are dividing by -1, so I need to flip this. Now it's less than or equal to, and if you do 0 divided by -1, that's just 0. So that is the answer. I'm going to go ahead and graph this. 0 in the middle, and I will use a closed circle because of the less than or equal to. And because it's less than, I should go to the left. Because it's less than, I should go to the left. So the domain is just a single interval. It's from -infinity to 0 with the bracket after 0. Okay? So that's how you can find the domain of a square root function. Make sure to set that radicand greater than or equal to 0, and just be careful solving for that inequality. Sometimes you have to flip the inequality when you are dividing or multiplying by a negative number. But that's it for goal number 6. I will come back and show you the very last topic called working with a fractional function involving radicals. So kind of putting those two things that we just talked about together. Okay?